Student housekeeper Alton Jeff.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I'm Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. What's up, guys? I hope everyone is having a great Monday, and we are going to have a fun show. Man, we've had some great shows the last 2 weeks. Last
Yeah,
week
they
was a
have
great one, talking about everything that happened in Quebec Open and getting to highlight two of our, young talents, young stars of our sport, and Tyreek and Esteban. And then the week before, we had the legend, one of the best all-around competitors ever, Jason Borelli on.
That
So
was a
it's
treat.
been a lot of fun, man.
For those
So
who know me, if you've listened to Inside Scoop for more than 2 weeks, you know I am a huge Jason Borelli fan, and Jeff surprised me with that one too. He didn't want
oh
to
yeah,
tell me.
didn't even tell everyone that.
Well, there
That's
is
true.
but you know what though, Jason never wants to say no. So sometimes Jason will say, "Yeah, I'm going to be there for something," and like he can't really do it. So sometimes there's that too, right? So
True.
I thought about it later once he was on, and I saw him. I'm like, that makes sense. But no, that was a treat. And if you heard it, I was probably geeking out most of the show.
Yeah.
But wait, and
Um,
you know what was interesting though, Jeff? Did you notice when
what?
I told him like, "Yo, Jason, you're number one on not just my top kickers list, on pretty much everybody. Someone, some will say no, Pedro's the best ever, and it's not like you're gonna say that you shouldn't say that. Pedro, Xavier is an amazing kicker, so why shouldn't you say that? It's not bad.
Right.
But who are some of yours? Some of those names did not even know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that
You
was
didn't
crazy.
know?
So as he's naming them, I'm like, let me jot it down, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, just
Yeah.
some of the people that he was talking about. And I'm like, wow, this is so interesting to get in like the head of where you were.
Right.
It's just really interesting.
It was,
And
man. It
you know what other thing? I never brought this up to him. And then we should keep going because I don't want tonight to go too long as well.
right.
So I got a chance to go to some of the TAC schools. And yeah, Jason Morelli, Jason Tankson he's not just the greatest fighting kicker that there is. This guy's kicks are very freaking good. You know, like when you have like a bar in your karate school where you hold it for balance,
Yeah.
they don't have that. They don't have that at all. They have
Yeah.
nothing. So I'm
Yeah. I
like,
don't have that either.
wait, time out. You are like that. And
What?
none of that? Like, how did this happen? How did this happen? Right? It'd be
Funny.
one thing if, like, all right, yeah, your school doesn't have that. A lot of schools don't. All right. That's okay. But how does this school produce that without that? All right. And at the time, my head couldn't fathom it. Like I didn't
Did they
get it.
have a wall though, Alex?
But yeah, I understand that. You got a wall, and that's what
All right.
mainly
So all you
I'm
need
like,
is the
all right,
wall.
you improvised, you went to this, but remember, I started martial arts in '92, so at that point we were all doing that. What year did you start martial arts, Jeff?
88. Yeah.
'88. Okay, so you're
1988.
even damn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So my instructor, yeah, he always had the rail there for that.
right,
But I've never had that in my dojo, in my school since I've opened it. We just put our hand on the wall. We do kicking drills on the wall, or you put it on a chair, or we do, all kinds of things like that. Or you grab your partner's hand and you both are working balance drills like that. There's a lot of things. You use your partner as your wall, and that way they are
yeah,
working
I
on their
know
core
we've
strength.
done that.
Yeah. it's a lot of good stuff there that you can do.
It is
Or,
good.
you know,
It is good.
you remember the drill that came out during COVID that I did? You hold your own slap pad and you kick for yourself. You kick your own slap pad. That's a great drill.
I do remember that. That was pretty cool.
I need to put that out there again. That's a good one. That's one of my favorite ones. All right. So today, again, guys, we haven't mentioned them in a while, but we want to mention Virtual Fight Tour because guess what? They're going to have a big show coming up in the King of New York in September. So get ready for that. And Jesse may join us later on the show, but we're going to also bring him on sometime soon as well. We may have some other guys, some guests. Guys, we're going to talk about the best eras in martial arts, sport karate. We want to hear about all of these, what your favorites. We want to hear in the comments. We're going to post them up. If you want to kind of join in real fast to give your 2 cents, let us know, and we'll kind of bring you in. But yeah, Leandro says King New York's an awesome tournament and excited to hear that. So, all right.
So this topic,
Where do you want to kind of go from with this? Go with this there, Alex.
This topic there's so many layers to it, which is why this one question of, what's the best era in sport martial arts?
Right.
There, you could not only could you spend the whole episode on this one question, you could talk for days on this.
You could really, Alex, though, we could even just spend this time defining the eras. Because a lot of times we get ourselves caught on the 80s and we think of a decade, or we think of the 90s and we think of a decade. But really, it could be an era where it could be like 4 years, that could change. Like honestly, even this era we're in right now could be called the COVID era from 2020 to now, because we're still dealing with the prize money thing, all this and that, still the effects of that, So there's a lot to where things could be, right? Brett, brings it down too. You could break it down to divisions. There's different eras in the sport. When we're talking about forms and fighting, there's a lot, that you could discuss on that. So pretty cool. It's a loaded question, but what
I think I'd like to do is for us to talk about our favorite era, or maybe not even just our favorite, but what we think. Like, I think this era is the best era of sport martial arts, like, and whatever one that would be. So, but I think we got to start, like, how did we get to where we are? And I think that's an important thing to bring up. Like, all right,
good.
How did martial arts in America become such a thing? Right. And it is, right. And martial arts is a worldwide blessing, right? It's a worldwide treasure, right? That everybody gets to experience. So, and we are blessed that we do get to do this, that this does exist. And that's what makes the world small, in that we get to participate in this activity. And when you start to excel at a high level, like now it's like, okay, I now I get to meet this other person and yada da da, or this person over here. Now they start to hear about you, right? I remember before I went to the Irish Open, because I had never competed internationally before, I was talking to my homie Greg Betlock, and he was like, yeah, man, when I went over there first time, they already knew who I was. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why would they need to know you? He goes, man, it's just, they got YouTube, and there's more videos of us at the time. So when I went over there, they knew how I fought. I'm like, get the heck out of here. Right. So, but then he told me, I'm not gonna out him. He had fought some kid who was just a little interesting. But anyway, but I think figuring out how we got here, why did we get to where martial arts in America is? And I think because of the blessing that it is the United States of America, that if you have something that you have as like a skill or an asset that you have to offer, this is the best country to live in to really exploit, and not exploit, that would be the wrong word to say, but really build on that and create not just a business, but a lifestyle, right? Here. Well, I think I think the biggest one I think would be Fumio Demura. Okay.
Yeah.
So when Fumio Demura came in, and we're gonna say some names that maybe people are like, "What the heck are you talking about? Who's that?" Fumio Demura is what he sounds like. This is as Japanese as it gets, right?
Right.
So when he comes here, he comes to California, and there's going to be some people in here that are Fumio Demura, and I hope I'm saying it right. Like
Yeah.
big time fans. So please chime in if I get anything wrong, because I don't want to get everything wrong. All right. And he comes here.
And if not, go and check his. There's a documentary about him. It's a really good one. Yeah, it talks. I think it's called like The Real Miyagi.
Oh yeah, and I have seen that. That's right. All right.
They also did a review on it on our show, Fist Kicks and Flicks, our martial arts network podcast, and they had a student of his that came on as well. So
dope.
Pretty cool.
That's right. I remember that. That was like a year or so ago.
Yeah.
Right.
About 2 years ago.
Yeah. So Fumio Demura, I'm gonna give the Alex Cliff Notes version. Goes to California, right? And he is like, okay, I can't remember. I think he was working at like a zoo, or no, it wasn't a zoo. It was like an amusement park. All right. So working at like an amusement park, and he's like, you know what? We got this thing. How about I do these karate demonstrations, right? And so he now he's created like a martial arts club, like a karate club, right? And he's taught some people karate, right? He's like, yeah, let's do these karate demonstrations in the park, right? And his whole thing is it's boxing with your feet, right? Look at what I can do with my feet. But he was also a weapons genius, like not just like he could do this weapon, like listen, the way he handles, the bow is amazing. Like no, everything. Every weapon. It was like phenomenal.
Yeah.
At that time, everything. What you would do, qualify everything. All right. So, and it was amazing. So now martial arts in America, right, was really karate, right? There was like karate and judo, right? So, but I kind of credit Fumio Demura as to why in America, when we see martial arts, still to this day, we say karate. Like, look at their karate. Like, I can't tell you all the time. I remember thinking this in the 90s, and we do Taekwondo, and we're in the Junri system. You don't get more Taekwondo than that, right? And there was someone who was like, man, look at this kid's karate. It's so good. I'm scratching my head, and I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then one time I said to Hank Farah, and if anybody knows who Hank Farah is, Hank Farah, he's a phenomenal martial artist. He's the senior of John Woolley and Larry Carnahan, which at that time when I'm a young teenager, like they're everything. And I said to him, I'm like, Mr. Farah, why did you say it was a good karate? And he goes, what else are you gonna call it, Alex? And he just walked away. And I'm like, oh, this is
well, I mean, the school was called what? National Karate, right? And they taught Taekwondo. So
and we taught Taekwondo, right?
Right.
And we don't even make any claims. We don't even like say anything about it, right?
Right.
At one point, I had to go, wait a minute. So why are we called? It's like, what else are you gonna call it, Alex? All right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
I mean, answer works for me, right? So because of that, there was just this big boom, right? And you get someone like I just brought up, like Junri comes here. And we got Staples, we got Alan Steen, we got Ed Parker, right? Dwayne Campos. Now we've got karate competition. We're now into the 60s and 70s. Okay. We have martial arts competition.
Bruce
Lee.
Say
that again.
And you got Bruce Lee.
Then comes our big man Bruce. So martial arts in cinema was a really cool thing. So I can't remember what happened. I don't know what happened. Something. I think my son Zachary came. Bruce Lee came on the screen, and he was like, "Dad, what is this guy doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, this guy, he's something." And how, because I'm not a big like Bruce is the greatest guy. Right? I'm not. Okay.
Right.
So, but I want to build him up and my son doesn't know who he is, so I don't want to, make it seem like, oh no, he's not that good, because I'm not going to do that, because really he is, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
he's this. So my son is watching the stuff on the screen. He goes, "Oh, Dad, I know how to do that. He did a back fist," and I'm like, "Okay, this is kind of cool." Now my son's drawn into it, and he just thinks this is the coolest thing, and I'm like, "This okay." Because he can see the moves and is like,
Yeah.
I see that, I know that, I like that, I think I can do that. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. Which I always think is the right thing to do as far as cinema, right? When you
Right.
watch some kind of demo, when you watch someone do like a triple cork, you're like, well, my brain can't comprehend what my eyes just saw. That's
Right.
amazing. I've never seen anything that great. And then I just go about my day and I walk away, right?
Yeah.
Because that's it, right? There's nothing left. Like, okay, well, that's it. All right, I just saw something amazing. But if I see someone get turned side kicked in the chest, my brain can comprehend what my eyes just saw, right? Moving on.
Because you
we're
feel like
in,
you can do it.
yeah. So, but now we're in tournaments now. Now there's like in the 60s and 70s, martial arts competition is a thing. Martial arts schools are building up. They're big.
Yep. And it's a completely different time, like when you really look at that, but still the names from that era are still talked about to this day, like we still hear about Alan Steen, we still hear about the Worleys, we still hear about Chuck Norris, Bill Wallace, Jeff Smith, Howard Johnson, all these guys that, and even, that 60s, and then you get into the 70s, and then we're getting into also even the original, like full contact karate, which becomes American kickboxing, what we kind of know is above the waist kickboxing now, but all that started in the martial arts tournaments, because when the first championships where they had the full contact championships were Jeff Smith, Joe Louis, all these guys who are sport karate tournament champions, Bill Wallace, all these guys. This is all created. This is on a stage. There was not even they weren't in a ring. They were on a stage, like what we see at tournaments now, and doing full contact, kind of like what we would see at the Battle of Atlanta years later. What we would see at super fights years later in the 2000s, right? That was kind of the era. That was the way that it started. So, and then
I think the 70s is really when real competition started. And I don't want to try to poo-poo, like, there was competition in the 60s. But even then in the 60s, I don't think they thought this would continue for 60 years later. I don't think so, right? So I think like, this is what we're doing right now. Let's just throw a tournament.
Yeah. But you also had like more dojo wars in the 60s, like we're talking about like when Plowden was on here, and even Jason was on here talking about, the Count, and all these guys, all the crazy stuff that was happening, and the, the fights and the people raiding schools and stuff. All that was happening still in the 60s.
Crazy.
Of course, it still happened in the 70s, but there's just so much going on. Guys, comment what you're thinking. If you have anything about 60s, 70s, who are some names that you like? Someone who always would chime in about these guys from the 60s and 70s was Big Jack. I always loved, no matter what.
That's true.
We had convos about this back in the day on the Point Fighter or the Black and Blue discussion boards. He would always be like, you guys are forgetting about this guy and Howard and Jeff Smith. And, so it was Big Jack. Yep. Chris is saying it, man. It's so true. I'm going to get to this comment just from Tom. He just says the earlier area, the better to him. He says competitions were all around martial arts who also competed. The fighters today are arguably better, which we may get into that as well. But many train for tournaments exclusively. In the past, the tournaments were a side note and secondary to their all-around training, which he's got a point, there. Yeah, Howard Jackson. I said Howard Johnson. I think I was talking about the hotel. So Howard Jackson, Jeff Smith. Yes, sir. But I think he has a point on that part, but I also see it differently too with some of the top guys, because a lot of the guys we see in point fighting tournaments, a lot of these guys are training boxing now. A lot of these guys are training kickboxing now. They're, we talked to Kevin Walker, recently. Him, Bailey, Devin, all these guys are training to, yes, be the best in what they do now, but they're getting ready to go to the next step. So,
well, here's one thing. I think what's different about our sport. Oh, Mike
Yep,
P,
Benny the
you're
Jet.
right. Benny the Jet. Benny the
Mike Stone, Ray McCullum. Oh, and do you know they're supposed to have a Benny the Jet movie coming out, right? It's going to have a biopic about it. It's going to be sick. So, yeah, that's supposed to be
Is it going to be like in theaters?
It's supposed to be, I forgot who the actor is. Supposed to be a pretty big actor.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to see that.
Dude, Keanu Reeves. That's who it is. Keanu Reeves is supposed to do it.
Get the heck out of here. Keanu Reeves is going to be Benny. Isn't Keanu Reeves like 6 inches taller than what Benny was?
I think it's supposed to be like producing it or something. I don't know if he's actually going to be the actual guy, but he's going to be heavily involved in the movie. So, yeah. So that's sweet, guys.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's different about our sport than, when I say our sport, I mean sport martial arts, than other sports. Like if you go like, all right, take track and field. You can objectively say they're faster and better now than they ever were, because you can objectively say that. Like time says they're faster.
Somewhat.
Right?
Yes.
You can go and go look at without steroids. These guys are faster than they were in the 80s. It's just math tells us they're faster. They're better. Okay. That you can objectively say. All right.
Somewhat. Yeah. You still have,
if you were to say
technology, the equipment, all that's better. You look at baseball with, like,
no, you're totally right.
Like the shoes are completely different now. There wasn't, you were just running on dirt back then. There's turf. So some of those things are a little different, but
this is why the conversation's better. But then that's the same thing here today. When we were competing on gym floors for everything and cold concrete versus a mat.
Exactly.
How much longer could Billy Blanks have fought if there were matted floors?
That's true, but you look on the other end. Remember when Ibi Abdallah was on? He said,
he said the same
mats
thing.
Was the end of his career. He said the opposite. He said adding mats was actually what made his career shorter. So it's an interesting thing,
I did hear him say that, but we've all been on mats that suck.
Oh yeah. Well, all right. So when you started, this is a whole nother thing that we could get into, and let's hear from you guys. What surface did you start on? And let's kind of go through it, right?
Carpet.
So I started at a dance type school where it was pretty much like hardwood floors, like a dance studio, or like a and then out from there we went to another hardwood floor, which was pretty much like an aerobics type. It was a gym, a big fitness center, and they had just mirrors and hardwood floors almost. And then we also had racquetball floor. So everything was pretty rough, right? And then
what's the difference between a racquetball floor and a gym floor?
It's a little bit more hollow, a little bit different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then but it's also, I'm just talking about the actual racquetball room. There's not much like the air to breathe. It's a little, hardwood floor. Then when I went to back to my instructor, who became my black, who I got my black belt from, Master Arthur, his was the first where there was like a mat, and it was just like this big fat like rubber.
That's just too extreme.
Yeah, that just every time you moved, it shred. So you just had your feet just covered with just pieces of mat, and it did that for years. It was just like foam. It was like a thick foam. And then we covered that foam up over top with carpet. So it was kind of bad too. So Yeah, it was just kind of crazy. Yeah, and then you had holes in the carpet, broke my toe so many times doing that. So, yeah, it's a lot of different things, you know. Then you have cement covered with carpet, and then when the puzzle mats came out, everything kind of changed, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, let's see.
So
Chris says he's saying right now he's currently in cement. Wow. Chris says hardwood floors, then indoor, outdoor carpet mats. Yep.
and I think that's the mats, the puzzle mats is something that we have to thank um uh Taekwondo and the Olympics for because
Well, the swing mats, right? You had the swing
well,
mats too.
there's the swing mats, but those are judo mats. Okay.
Yeah.
But when the puzzle mats came out, that was a little different. Okay.
Where was the
So
first time you remember seeing mats like at a tournament? What was the first?
it was a Taekwondo tournament I went to. I went to a
Okay.
local Taekwondo tournament in the 90s. And I am like, the heck is this? Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you mean? What's this? And they didn't know every Taekwondo school that they know has that. Every tournament they go to has that. Everybody they know has those. And I'm like, what is this stuff? And they're like, what do you compete on? And I'm like, now I don't want to say, you know what I mean? I'm like, the gym floor. They're like,
Yeah.
doesn't that hurt? And I'm like, and I said, like, well, yeah, but you just suck it up a deal. You don't say nothing about it. Like, yeah, it
Yeah.
hurts. You're like,
So
Jesus, don't you like injure yourself? Well, yeah, but again, stop being a baby. Like, this is the stuff that I'm saying, and I'm like,
but a lot of us like
maybe we should have mats.
right. So a lot of us like when we went to tournaments that were at a hotel, we are like, oh, this is cool. We get carpet. This is gonna be
You get
great,
good
right?
carpet.
That was
There's
a
like,
big
because
perk,
there's
right?
like thin, tiny little like tight wound carpet, or there's
But
that
also,
like cushioned carpet.
yeah, but
Oh,
Alex,
man.
the first tournament I saw that kind of did something that was different, before Maddie was Compete Nationals, and they always had the carpet cut out rings. And so each ring was
Yes.
carpet on its own. And that was kind of the setup for it. Look who we got to talk about this. Oh, Coach.
Coach, look who's here.
What's up?
Well,
Yo, Coach,
we're
while we're
talking
on
about
it,
a topic.
we're talking about mats, floors. When was the first time you remember seeing mats or anything covered at a tournament besides concrete, or heck, if you went to New England Open, you would be on ice. That was the worst.
I don't even know if I ever competed on a mat.
Get out of here. Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't remember competing on mat. I remember Capital Classics was a cement floor.
Yep.
Shoot, everything was hard floor. I don't remember mats at all.
Well, we're bringing up these different variables because we're really kind of talk about like what era of sport martial arts was the best era for sport martial arts competition. And everything's got its ups and it's down. I mean, the surface is a factor, right? But what is it? I mean, I would say this is another thing we can objectively say. You can objectively say that the surface today is better than anything else, right? You can objectively say that, right?
Safer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta think though too. I mean, back in the 70s, early 80s, sweeps were allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, it was on concrete on gym floors.
That's crazy.
You know.
And stomps to the head were allowed as well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is a big part of losing a lot of competitors. I mean, it doesn't favor a Kung Fu stylist or a Shotokan stylist anymore. You know, they have no defense against a front leg or a blitz like that, where back in the day when you would fight a Billy Beeson or a little KA, I mean, you lift that leg up and try to kick them 10 times, they'd sweep you, stomp you. I mean, it was just even the Kung Fu stylists had a chance back then. You know, it's almost like the rules favor just sport karate schools, and that's
They
basically,
do.
That's
you
true.
know.
That's true. That's a good point, Coach. Just because, yeah, it's I heard them talking about this on the other podcast. Eugene was saying, "Man, a Tai Chi guy, I'll never see a Tai Chi guy win, or this or that. A Kung Fu guy never has a chance. I never see him do well in sport karate tournaments." But I remember seeing that in the 70s, 80s, people having shots because of the sweeps and the groin kicks and different things, right?
Oh yeah. Well, look at Willie Bam. Come on. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Willie Bam, great fighter. I mean, I even fought Keith Hirabayashi. I mean, all them guys all fought.
Mhm.
It's that there
Sonny
was yes, yeah, absolutely. Stuart Kwan.
Yep.
They were all good fighters. I mean, it's just a different. I don't know how you can even really compare eras. I
I
mean,
know that's the hard part, but we're gonna try. So
I
if we had to categorize them,
Mhm.
put the 60s and 70s are an era, 80s are an era. I mean, I know nothing is as clear cut as just this decade, but we're doing our best. 80s is an era.
Mhm.
What would we call the 80s, Jeff?
I don't know. I mean,
I
I
don't know.
think that was the arrival of sponsorships when you really think about it, or
I'd call the '80s competition.
competition. I like it.
Yeah. And then the 90s is when, I mean, everything blew up.
The
You know,
the '80s and the '90s to me, I think were the best sport karate eras.
she just went right to it.
Yeah. Was I supposed to slowly go to
I
it?
don't know.
No,
We didn't even finish.
we hadn't even. Yeah.
But you know what? Let's talk about it. All right.
Mhm.
I'll just go to it as well. I think the 90s is the best era of sport martial arts competition. You hinted on a couple of the reasons why one of the reasons why I'd say so. You said like Keith Hirabayashi, like he fought too. Everybody did that. Everybody did everything. And it was the
In the 80s
culture
and the- yeah.
that it would be strange if you saw 5 guys just do form. Right? It would be if you saw like, all right, like 1 or 2 or 3 guys, you'd be like, all right, yeah, I get it. Whatever. You're doing your thing. Right. And you're gonna have Richard Brandon, like, okay, I get it. You're probably not gonna fight a ton. Right. I get it. All right. But for the most part, most of the guys did everything, right? Would you say so, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and also too, there was less division, so it was forms, weapons, fighting, and really weapons didn't become a thing until really the mid '80s, right? So, and again, like forms competition wasn't really a thing until the mid '70s or late '70s. So, like it was just demos of
90s when it
those,
took off.
those things. So when it really kind of exploded was that, and so if you're going to go to a tournament, you might as well do all three. And back then, you paid for one price for all three. You might as well do all three, right?
Yeah.
I remember, and listen, I love the 2000s. I think the 2000s are fantastic. I think the 2010s, right, and right now the 2020s, I think the high-end talent, it's, let's just say in fighting right now, I think it's hard to say that the top 5, most talented fighters in the 2010s and 2020s couldn't just have a feast in the other eras as well. All right. Sure. Styles are different. Contact's obviously different. Right. But if you take these top 5 guys, I think you could plop them in an era, and I think that they could do very well. I think, what's, how am I trying to get this?
What are you
I
trying to say?
remember competing and winning divisions in like the mid 2000s and wanted to really be like, man, I'm doing it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm pretty sure Reggie Perry kicked my ass. and I'm having these thoughts internally, right? Because I want to be like really proud of myself. But like, I just won the middleweight division. And then I'm thinking back like 10 years ago. I don't think I'd beat him. And I'm looking around like, oh, yeah, but there's Trevor Nash and there's Jotty Tension and Jason Borelli is the greatest kicker anyone two eyes have later have seen, you know, and Raymond Daniels is Raymond Daniels. But I think it was as high. That's how high it got. But I think it wasn't as deep then. And I think something happened. And it was that as soon as 2000 hit, like it was just a little different. But I did remember thinking just something like that. Like I think if I was dropped into 1996, I don't think I'd win. You know what I mean?
I mean, you have to go, like, if you go to a tournament today, and what kills me about today, I was in a black belt meeting. I won't say where, when, about not this past year, the year before the tournament, and an instructor was asking, you know, what is the rule on contact? How come they're hitting so hard? And I didn't say nothing. I mean, for you to have to ask why people are hitting so hard. I mean, like, tell me this. You know what I hear the most complaints about, and I hear the most complaints about? Cam Dawson. Why? Why do we hear complaints about Cameron Dawson?
But he doesn't do illegal moves.
Why? Because it's hard. He fights hard. I mean, come on. That's
it.
I mean, when somebody has more ability than you, not saying that they have more ability than him or whatever, what do you do? If I fought a Pedro or a Brady, what did I have to do? I had to try to hit them harder to take a little bit of the fight out. You understand? If Cam is hitting people harder, what does that cause? That causes hesitation in his opponents, right? They're going to think before they try to score on him because they're going to be met with something, you know. I mean, and it's just a whole different era out there when people are complaining that someone is hitting too hard. Well, go to the heavyweight division in the 90s, okay, with Richard Plowden, Terry Kramer, Anthony Price, Billy Blanks, Nasty Anderson, Zip White, Scorpion, Hakeem. I mean, the list goes on. And what were the odds on picking a winner? No, harder 90s to pick a winner. You know, I mean, if we go to a tournament, everybody's money's on one fighter.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
That's the hard.
But
right. That's a
but
great.
you said go look at the heavyweight division then. But what about the lightweight division?
Oh no, I'm just saying as far as heavy hitters. No, in the lightweight division, and they were hitting hard too. You had Marty Eubanks, both Brady's, Pedro. The list goes on and on. It was insane. If you won your division, I mean, it was hell. I mean, they had some fighters. Alan Horner, I remember him. He was a good damn fighter. I mean, it's the list is big. Chris McBride, you know, it's everybody back then literally tried to kill each other, beat each other up.
Right.
You know,
well,
so the ability was just as good. There's not many kickers better than like a Pedro, a Brady. You know, them guys also Beatty. I mean, Mafia. I mean, they were also serious kickers. I mean, so it's not like now all of a sudden we have a few real good kickers. Back then there were a lot of good kickers.
Yes, everybody was a kicker. I mean, everybody could kick. You know, I mean, it was just different. The thing though, I'm going to look at it a different way and look at like what led to each thing. You know, like really the 80s was the first time that there were teams and sponsorships. Because before it was just you just repped your school, and then you know Budweiser came around, Trans World, you know, the Atlantic, you know, all these guys, American Airlines, Paul Mitchell, all these kind of came out from there, and the ending of that whole era with all the different money and going up and down and figuring out what league's going to last really created the 90s, which actually created division when you really had NASCA and NBL, and you had West Coast fighters and East Coast fighters more, not really seeing each other that much,
Right.
There was a whole different thing with that part. So like in the 90s, there was a lot of different amazing, great fighters that never even fought each other because the only time they would see each other was Long Beach Internationals, and that faded out really. In the 90s, it was not as big of a deal as it was in the 80s, right? So
Yeah.
so that was a whole different thing. And then that end of the 90s into the 2000s, I think of that as the crossover period, because that was the first time where people, especially fighters, were doing both leagues. And we had a lot to do with that, Coach.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That was, that's when we decided to make that stand, do both leagues. And, and there was talent on the NBL side. Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think they had the best concept. They had the best concept as far as the fighting and the super grands and all that. I mean, I've been trying to. I wish NASCA would come up with a world tournament at the end of the year where you compete for your world title, not just how many tournaments you went to or anything like. Because I went to 15 tournaments and I took second place at every one, but I'm a world champion.
Right.
You never,
or sometimes not even that, third, fourth. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
or the other person just didn't register. That
right.
happens a lot too. So there's a lot of things like that. But I think there were so many good fighters in the 90s, especially on the West Coast, that we didn't really, like a Ray Wizard and, Satch, and even Damon Gilbert didn't really do much NASCA until he joined, with CJB, and he was a monster.
I spotted him in where? In
Vegas.
Was it Vegas or
I think
was it
Vegas?
Yeah, maybe it was Vegas.
But it might have been the year before in Vegas too, in 2000, where you saw him too, because him and New Orleans as well, because him and Brian were battling every tournament.
Yes. Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting just on how that changed everything, and then from there, it led into what is the 2010s into now, which now I think we're still, even though to me I think we're so far away from COVID, but what's funny is we're still dealing with tournaments giving COVID prize money. People, changing and things like that. Like some tournaments, honestly, since COVID have been bigger than they were before COVID. Most of them have been. And the thing is that people got that cushion. And man, I realize why some promoters do not like me. I just realized that right now. I have that cushion, and they like. Man, we made a lot of money this year. That was the most we've ever made.
Yeah, they ran with it. So, I mean, can you?
I get it.
Do you think the NBA players got paid any differently because it was COVID? I mean, if you have a league or you have a tournament, you have to get paid the same. I mean, it's not the competitor's fault.
Right.
It's really if you're taking run that tournament, run it, or just don't run it that year if you don't want to pay that money. Right. I mean, paying for yourself. I mean, as far as running the tournament, not giving the money, and you know what I mean? And your tournament's bigger than it was 4 or 5 years.
Right. And that was why so a thing that especially in local tournaments and small tournaments, regional tournaments do, and even some national tournaments did this, was, and you see it all over on the flyer, must have 4 in the division to get money, or must have, then don't even advertise that you're giving money if you're going to do that. Because all that is a red flag that you're not expecting people to come, or that you really you're going to find some reason not to give the money. So I never like that. And to me, that's always a red flag. It's like, I'm not going there, because they're going to find some out. Because I've had that before, and they said 4 in the division to win. I said, hey, we had 4 in the grands. the promoters still tried not to get him because he said, yeah, but you didn't have 4 in every single division. That's it. Oh, name a tournament that does. And, when you have a soft style division and a Kempo division, there's only 1 or 2. Like, you just tried to put that in to be able to, screw the competitor. So that's just something that I think we got to get out of, like, in our culture in sport karate. So that was just a pet peeve I have. Sorry.
Coach, you'd be the perfect person to ask this, because I'm wondering, because for years, competitors have had it stuck to them, like, oh yeah, well, we're not giving that prize money. Has a competitor ever like made a stink so bad that like it was a major scene? Like, I think cops might get called. Has that ever happened?
I have
Well,
never
lay it on us.
I have never personally seen it. I did have an argument myself at one tournament where it was exactly that, had to be 4, and there was 3 in my division. I won first place, and they didn't want to give me first place money. And I said to them, do you realize that you fight the same amount of times with 3 or 4? You still have to win twice.
Right.
I mean, so
Yeah.
it didn't make sense to me. But yeah, I think that's like a cop out. I mean, I don't know. I remember one year I gave away $1,000 for team fighting at my event, and Straight Up was the only team there. Well, another team did show up, but they were underbelts and they were underage, and they tried to fight, but I wouldn't let them. And
Protect them.
And I gave Straight Up $1,000 for, and they were the only team there. It's not their fault. It's not a competitor's fault.
Exactly. It's not their fault. Yeah. Joe, it was, I've had that happen several tournaments in New Orleans, several different promoters. So it was something that they did a lot of those Louisiana tournaments. So,
well, we talked a lot about fighting with this.
Yeah.
Jeff, we're going to lean on you pretty heavily on this. Best era for forms.
Good God, that's so hard.
I
Because
would still
if
say 90.
You would
See,
still
I knew
say
you
the
would say-
90s. I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I would say, shoot, with Gabe Renaga, Mike Bernardo, Ho Sung, Ho Young, Alice Chang, Kim Dutrin. I mean, shoot.
She was more the 80s, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
80s, yeah.
You got Chat, Valera, Simon. I mean, really, it's hard to say with forms because we wouldn't have what we have now without.
You said it. That's right.
So the 90s, what I like about the 90s that we're missing now is the showmanship, is the performance. There's a few that get it and there's not. And again, I mean, I'll go back to what happened at AKA is because of showmanship. It's because of someone knowing how to put on a show for the crowd and the crowd getting behind them, and it's the same thing with people in the 90s. And that was another cool thing that was NBL was great at, was putting on a show. You had guys that would, dress up as Indiana Jones and do their form. You'd have, Butch Tokusala, do a death drop in a coffin, like come out in a coffin, like just crazy things like that. You had Mouse.
Crow. Yeah.
Yeah. The Crow, Carmichael. Yeah. Individuality and showmanship. The other thing too, though, is it still was, everyone was trying to be the first. Now it's hard to find something that you're going to be the first at, I just remember
the things that they are the first at today. It's hard for someone who doesn't know to be able to tell, like, oh, they were the first to do that, because it might just be like, oh, but he caught that under his leg. Be like, it looked the same to me, right?
Right.
So, I mean, do you really think the 90s was better than the 2000s for forms and weapons? You really think so? I don't. I think the 2000s.
So the 2000s were a really good era, but I think they're neck to each other. because one led to the other, you know. But then again, you go back to those guys that were known for the 90s. All those guys are talking about Charlie Lee and Stephen Ho from the 80s, you know, and Keith Mirabashi and Philip Wong and those guys that led them to there, you know.
Yeah. But what era would you consider like John Valera, Mike Chat, and
90s? Yeah.
90s. That's
Even
where they
though-
were their best.
That's where they were
That's where they
adults,
were
you
at their best.
right? I agree.
Yeah. But I mean, for me, well, it's still, I guess, 1990. But to me, I'm more of a fan of John Valera as a junior than even as an adult. And I may be the only person, but that's where
You are the only
that's
person.
where I saw him, you know.
You are the only person.
No, dude, if you saw John Valera doing Legend, and so many people, like, his form was called Legend back then, and so many people saw him as like a spitting image of Charlie Lee because he looked just like him. His cleanliness was like Charlie, his sharpness, his power, looking.
I can kind of agree with you. Yeah, and he fought as a junior.
Yeah, and he fought. Yeah, so yeah,
But
he was amazing.
Look at that.
He
You go from John Valera to being the spit image of Charlie Lee to Rudy Renyon
being a spitting
being
image
the
of
spit
John,
image of John Valera.
Right. Yeah.
and creating
I
something.
think Rudy's better than both of them.
In his own way, he's got a whole different flow, you know. He has that dance kind of that hip hop element as well, which I think
But
helps
see,
him.
this is the thing in forms. You can take someone, since we're talking about those eras, you take a guy from 1997 who was winning championships. Okay. If you took that guy in 97 and you plopped him in 1994, he'd be undefeated. Right. And you just go back just a couple of years. Right. You'd be like, oh my gosh, that's just how quickly it increases. Right. In skill and in difficulty and in performance. Right.
So
Mhm.
you
I
think,
think after a while, I think it started to kind of level off.
but do you
But I
think
don't think that happened until like the late 2010s.
do you think that if you dropped them in the 80s, how would they do?
Mm.
In forms,
It's a whole different.
Yeah.
well, I think their heads would spin because I don't think they'd even know what they were looking at.
Really? You think it would be easy to beat John Chung, George Chung?
No, I think if you took a guy from like
Here.
97, like who would, I don't
Good.
know.
Here's the problem with, especially in NASCA from the 90s and even 2000s, you put them in the 80s, especially, let's just say the musical division, none of them were choreographed, especially in NASCA,
No, none of them.
compared to what the choreography was in the
yeah.
80s. And,
With John,
and a lot of
Yeah.
them stopped kicking.
yeah.
And, there
Well,
wasn't the
that's a
kicking.
great point right there. That is a
piece,
really
yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's obviously some outliers. There's some guys that you could go, oh, well, you could put him there and yeah, he'd win. Yeah. But you could do the same kind of thing going the other way around. You could take, Nasty Anderson in the heavyweight division now. Would he be competing against Cam and Avery? Could he win? Yeah, he possibly could. Right. So you could, there are some guys that you can go, all right, they could kind of, be dominant in any era, but that's not what we're trying to talk about here. Overall, what's the best era of sport martial arts competition?
I say the 90s.
Are we all going to say the 90s? And
What do
see,
you
you
say,
talk to
Jeff?
someone like, so for me, I would say the 90s because everyone felt like they had that, especially early 90s. Everyone had that, oh, this is going to get me to Hollywood. This is going to get me, because a lot of those guys were coming there and scouting people, especially the late 80s to early 90s, to get to there, Now, you talk to someone like Jerry Fontenez, he'll say the 90s was where the sport kind of went down because the money got less. It got people kind of split up. The organization got
not
less,
wrong.
there's a lot of different things on that, yes, we're talking about, you're talking about people going to different ones, but you're talking about, let's just look at people that are still competing now that still have a shot. Like, all right, just look at last tournament. Casey Nash and myself both come from the 90s, early 90s era, and we're still competing and can win in 18 plus to this day. So I think that shows you a lot as well too. It's not just that we've been able to do this for a long time, but the era we came from too. A lot of the guys from the 2000s, they quit within 5 years, 10 years. A lot of guys from the 2010s, a lot of the lasting, there wasn't the last, same thing with Chris Walker. Chris Walker could come on right now and still be we've seen it where he's been valuable and won many team fights. A lot of these guys.
I think you're giving you and Chris Walker and Casey Nash, I think you're giving yourselves a discredit. Like, there's something to be said, right? You guys are not normal. Okay. You're not normal.
Right.
You can't just like,
But
there's not a lot of people like you.
Right. But the era is what fed us to be who we are. Like, without that era.
Okay.
Like,
good point.
You get what I'm saying? Like the competition that we went against, like who else? A lot of people haven't gone to a Battle of Atlanta and competed against 40 people and 50 people, in one division, you know what I mean? And then the next year they divided it up to be boys and girls. And then it was still the same amount.
Still a beast. Yeah.
No,
I did.
No. Like literally my division was 50 people, guys and girls together in 94. And they split it up so it wouldn't be as much. And it was still 50 people, just guys the next year. Like, wait, what? Like,
you would do that. You would have like in a fighting division, you'd have 7 fights and wouldn't get a finalist.
Right. Absolutely.
I did that one time. Well, it was one of my first tournaments as a junior black belt. I had 6 or 7 fights. Didn't even get a finalist. Right. But I didn't. But at the time, like you don't care. Nobody's like, I should have got 6th. Like nobody cares, right? But
yeah, CMX is hard, Alex, as well with forms. But Jackson makes a great point. Let's talk about traditional. Traditional now, honestly, is completely different. Like you put a John Su. Like we love and appreciate John Su's stuff, but would he, with that style now? Knowing him, he would evolve and he would make it work for him because we've seen him do it. Because here's the deal. People forget when John Su was on CJB, he was going and competing and beating Keith Weston and those guys in NBL doing traditional forms, no modifications, under 4 kias, no kicking above the chest, and then going to NASCA and doing the way that he did it, his own style, right? So.
But even
so
then, like, look at that though. Like, I think Jackson Rudolph is the best weapons competitor ever. But I think the 90s is the best era of sport martial arts. Like, you can't. It's not going to be, so clean. There's gonna be some stuff like that. Like, I think the 90s is the best era, but I think Raymond Daniels is the best fighter that's ever. Come across this circuit, this sport. It's just the way it goes.
Coach, what are you thinking in there, bud?
Yeah, you're thinking something right now.
I know.
I'm watching you.
I mean, I can see your points. I mean, I don't know. It was just so hard to beat them fighters, even as like a Raymond with a Nasty. I mean, Nasty, the way to win. Always found when he was Nasty, always found a way to win. No matter what. I mean, I mean, to me, Nasty's the greatest point fighter of all time.
You have said that before.
Yeah.
But what else you said before, though, Coach?
Nasty your favorite, though? Coach, was Nasty your favorite? I thought you always liked Billy better, though.
What's that?
Who's your favorite?
Was he your favorite, though?
No.
I thought you always liked.
Who you thought I always liked too?
Billy Blanks.
No, I thought Billy Blanks had the most ability of any fighter, but Billy Blanks could beat you with 5 straight back fists. His back fist was unbelievable, but he never did the same thing twice. He hit you with a back fist, then he tried a jump spin kick, then he tried a scissors kick, then he tried a cartwheel kick. Like he never did the same thing to win that he can just roll over people with,
Right.
And to me, yeah, Nasty did the simplest, most basic, and most effective point karate fighter ever. He did whatever it took to win. I remember when he was fighting Tony Young, and he jumped right on him, boom, in the ring, and landed on him and said, "The light never going to beat me." It's just it just his mind games and his he just always won, found a way to win.
Oh man.
My time is Pedro. I mean,
Pedro's
yeah.
your favorite.
Yeah, Pedro, Jason are my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to say those guys too for me. And then I've been a big fan of Jack's. Jack Felton is just I'm a big fan of his over these last 20 years. But yeah, it was Pedro, Jason, and for me, Ibby was they're all similar fighters with that leg, but different.
But like you said, you got fighters that come out that you can never. You step across the ring against a Chris Walker that you haven't seen in 5 years, and he beats you. I mean, he's always Chris was always on one of the top of my list also because Chris could bang.
Yeah.
Chris fight you with finesse, and he can bang with you. I mean, Chris always was a guy that I always looked at too. Him and Brandon Ballou, them guys.
Mm-hmm.
You look across the ring, you don't think that you're gonna beat them, and they just find a way to just win.
Right. Exactly. So true, Coach. So are we all saying the 90s? I think we are.
We're all saying the 90s.
Yeah.
You know what? Though? You know the other thing about the 90s is the 90s was just, and I don't want this to sound bad. I think the 90s was just more fun. The 90s was more. It was way more fun.
The fun. I mean, tournaments were more fun. The camaraderie was more fun. I mean, everybody would meet up after the tournament and just have a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, 2000s were pretty good for that too, though.
Well, yeah, but I think
different,
I was also in the 90s. I wasn't old enough to have that kind of fun.
Yeah, same.
So that's probably why I will also say the 90s. 2000s was a different kind of fun.
Yes.
I had all of that.
Much fun in 2000s, except my team, my great team.
Well, and see, that's the thing. This is where like your transparency is coming from. You're saying the 90s was the best, but in the 2000s, you had the best team pretty much throughout all the 2000s. And there was a couple of years where you didn't have a team. So then you obviously didn't have the best team because you didn't have a team then, right? So like in 2005, you didn't have a team, right? So obviously it couldn't have been your team. But I mean, pretty much throughout the 2000s, you had the best team.
Yeah, I honestly going on that. Yeah, I don't see any 3-man team beating the CJB era 3-man team.
But I mean, let's say it's 2009.
Anybody.
And then it's Hamed, Ross, and Jason Grenier or Cass Sigmund.
I mean,
I don't know. Jason Borelli is going to beat one of those guys. Trevor's going to be one of those guys.
With Trevor, Damon, and Jason.
Yeah, never mind.
That's
harder.
A little bit. No, I mean, but even with Hamed, and I mean, our styles just always meshed well. I mean, we always had great fighters that mixed well with any fighter. I mean, Hamed, as little as he was, he didn't care. He'd fight the biggest guy on the other team. He
Well,
never,
always seen that.
he here. I mean, you get a fighter like that, then you're golden. I mean, when I picked up Trevor Nash, I didn't even see Trevor fight to his ability. He was limping and couldn't even walk when I picked up Trevor Nash, and I just said, this kid has too much heart to lose.
Right.
Well,
Right.
maybe this is a better one. Who would win between Jason, Trevor, and Damon, or Ross, Ahmed, and Jason Grenier?
Do not put me in that position.
Why? They're all done now. It doesn't matter.
No, do not be in that position. You cannot. No, but it would be a tie.
So what about let's put all right, it's hard to say right now who's the top 3-man team because we've had a really good as far as right now, we've had a lot of parity right now with the teams right now.
Yeah.
So that's been fun within our sport right now. A 3-team fighting is kind of not saying it's gone anywhere, but it's came back as far as being multiple teams having shots. Let's just say for the most part, a lot of times, Straight Up has been a top team there, or even, Paul Mitchell, like who, do any of those guys kind of like, I don't know, man, it's hard to go against Jason, Trevor, and Damon because I just remember sitting there next to Gerald and a lot of these other guys that have been around for a long time. And this was 2002, 2004. And they're just like, the problem is like, these guys don't make mistakes and they'll all step up for each other. You know what I mean? Like, and all of them were going to throw down too. And all of them were going to throw down,
Flying one, that's, could be like, all right, obviously let's not forget about these guys, Raymond, Jack, and Robbie.
Yeah. That
We
was
beat
it. And his
What,
team.
yeah, we know that, Coach. We know that, right?
I don't see any of the teams early or later that would have beat them 3.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, Coach, though? Like, I think we talk a lot, and I'm not trying to disrespect Damon at all either, but we were undefeated with Russ. We were undefeated with Freddie. We were undefeated with Renee as that third, too, for a year, for 2 years. Like from 2000 to 2001, we were undefeated for a whole year. That was before Damon got on the team. Then we were undefeated again from 2001 until the end of 2002, or maybe the beginning of 2003. And that was with Damon. So, like.
And we had a little part with Tom Roberts in there.
Yep. Tom Roberts, man, there was a lot, Thomas was in there for a bit, Manny Reyes was there for a tournament. Brian Ruth was there for a tournament or two, Joey Greenhall was there for a tournament or two. Ninja was there for a while. And that was why we get Ninja, because Trevor was no longer on the team. And so, you know what?
He was the only one that
we won.
He gave Trevor fits.
Yep.
He gave fits. Yeah, absolutely did. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think Ninja, Lamont Fitzpatrick, he is of all the guys that you've coached, and you've coached a lot, he fits you a ton. I don't know. Don't you think so, Coach?
In which way?
Well, in the sense that, like, I look at like Ninja and I'm like, this guy can do everything, right? He could do everything. He's extremely explosive, right? And he's a heavy hitter, and he does. He just creates problems, and he makes you fight a little awkward, right? Like whatever you think you're gonna do, like he makes it whatever the thing that you do, he makes it a little bit more difficult for you to do. Yeah. Thankfully, I never had to fight the guy.
Nobody could ever get really a rhythm with Ninja. That's
what I'm looking to say. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
He broke everybody's rhythm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of different, man, we just had a lot of people in that third spot, you know. But I mean, that original group, that original, like between Jason and Trevor, just that combo was just, you know, those guys grew up fighting against each other as juniors all the time. They, you know, when you saw them, you picked both of them up because they were fighting each other, you know, like it just fit, you know.
Yeah, no, that definitely fit. I mean, we almost had it was only a one-time phone call, and they'll all tell you the same. It's like we almost had Raymond Daniels. It was going to be Jason, Trevor, and Raymond Daniels, but I on the phone. Look, you got to make up your mind now because we're making our team, and that's it. And Raymond waited, and Jason, Trevor agreed, and we never went back to Raymond. He went somewhere else. But that would have been crazy too with the three of them at that point of their career. Forget it.
Right. And you know what? Like Damon really fit. You know, we almost had Brian Plimple in that at that time, which would have been crazy as well. You know, there's so many great things. You know, there's so many guys who played that third role. Like Josh Horwitz did a great job. Tom Roberts, you know, a lot of these guys. So I know we're talking about different eras, but we knew we'd get back to that CJB 3-man team because you know what it talks about that era, you know, of team fighting, of who would be the best. You know, you talk to Anthony Price, he would say our 3-man team would still beat it. You know, he thinks, you know, him, Nasty and Plowden, you know, would beat that, you know. You know, you said before,
love that. That would be awesome,
that would be,
right? That's another 3-man team that's serious. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, that team's serious. I would love to see more fights of like Trevor and AP. That would just be, you know, yeah. I mean, that would just be nuts. Damon with any of the, you know, Nasty and Damon and Richard. I know they fought a little bit when Damon was younger, but not too many times. You know, I mean, and there's so many rivalries that people don't even know about, they haven't seen. You know, for me, the one that I've just seen videotape, and I read in the magazines, but the 90s rivalry for me was like Ray Wizard and a young Damon Gilbert because it was Bay Areas versus, you know, North Cal versus SoCal. And that was a rivalry that got heated and brawls and everything. And, you know, Ray Wizard really is the person that kind of pushed Damon to be who he became as a great, you know,
they had
they
had a serious group of fighters. I mean, they had fighters fight.
Right.
You know, they had Ray Wizard, Alvin Plowden. They had another. It was a white kid, skinny kid. He used to fight Pedro. He was a good fighter on the Sherman Oak Raiders.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to remember his name right now. I mean, there was a lot from out there. Jeff Newton was a good one out there.
Yeah, we had a brawl in Vegas because of them two going at it.
Salerno, Ronald Salerno. I want to say Salerno. I can't think of his last name. Mike P knows who it is. He was in here.
I want to hear about the brawl.
Well, we've talked about that, the one in Vegas where, you know, and Mike P was involved in that too, I think.
Yeah, they went to a hotel looking for him and everything. It was a big
There's a lot of stories.
Yeah. I don't remember. That was a long time ago. I just remember it happening. I don't remember the details, you know, but it was big. They had, what was that kid's name? It was like, I forget. But he was a good fighter. The Sherman Oaks Raiders had a good team. They had some good fighters, hard fighters, real hard.
Yeah, with Barry Gordon. Yep. Barry Gordon was good.
Barry Gordon had the other guys from Bay Area's best. You had Leo Greer. I mean, they had fighters. That Sean Adams was Sean Adams.
Sean Adams was around that area too. You know, Bearfield was from NorCal as well. You know,
Yeah.
so a lot of those guys, man,
Jose Pacheco.
Pacheco, man, that guy, that's another one of the greats that people don't
Forget
don't
about.
talk about. That dude's beating everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so pretty interesting, man. I mean, listen, we could go on and on about just so many names, and I think, you know what, like, more people need to hear these names. You know, I wish that we had more film so people, when they look them up on YouTube, they could find some, you know, some of that. You know, sometimes there's some of that on Black and Blue, but there's not always the names. But if you want to see highlights from the 90s, go to watch all the Black and Blue videos. Because Jonathan asked about that. Is there some 80s and 90s? You know, there's a lot of 90s film from of forms and weapons and fighting
We
highlight.
didn't realize the gem that we had at the time with Wally Faulkner producing all of these films, right? He really was, like, in real time, like, here you go, guys. This is a time capsule. We didn't realize
And
that at the
tell you
time.
what, one of the biggest businessmen in our industry ever realized it and has him hired him, and he works for him right there. Bill Clark, you know, the guy who has probably created more martial arts schools of anyone with ATA and Warrior and everything. He has, Wally has his own office there.
I think we get a sponsorship. I talked to a while ago when we were doing the virtual forums and all that. And I talked to a lot of the old time Sonny Ono. I talked to a bunch of the old time forums people if they had videos. And I think if we get a video from all of the old time and we get sponsors to chip in and we run a tournament with just them videos to find out which form, what era.
Amen.
That, you know what though? That's something we could do now. We could go back, and this is another thing you can objectively do. We could look at, like, okay, we're gonna look at, I don't know, Mike Bernado's form from the 1991 Battle of Atlanta, you know, and we're gonna look at, I don't know, Richard Brandon's form from the 1994 Diamonds, right? And then now we're going to take John Valera's form from the 1997 US Open. Boom. Which one wins? And we can look at it and watch it and objectively say this one wins.
Yeah.
And you got a point there,
Jackson. I don't totally disagree with you. This is where I was kind of going with the forms. It's really, it's hard, man. It's hard to compete against that. But when you say guys like Emig, Choka, you know, Terada,
love you too, Rob.
It's hard, but at the same time, like, those things don't happen without Chat, Valera, Carmichael Simon, Mike Bernardo, Richard Brandon, Ming Lu.
Calman's the same thing as me. You know, we grew up in that era, you know, the same era, you know, and we were competing at 7, 8, 9, 10 with all those guys and competing on stage with Carmichael and stuff, you know, which shaped us. You know, a lot of the other guys that competed with him didn't start competing at a higher level until the later 90s or even the actual 2000s, you know. So
let's get a list.
And
let's get a competition.
We'll
call every one of them, if it's Sonny Ono, whatever, and we'll ask what form that they would like.
Whoa. You're saying they get to submit their favorite form?
Yeah.
They did,
It's better.
We get 20.
Coach, I love this.
Oh man, see, those are some of my favorites. Those are some of my favorites. Ho Sung Ho Young.
Some of those are hard though, Coach, because like some of those, like what Ho Sung Pak, like you kind of have to be in the building to really get the full grasp of what is happening with this 3-sectional staff, right? Because I had never seen a 3-sectional staff before that point, right? So But I mean, we're gonna do the best we can. We can't be perfect. We gotta do the best we can.
Well, if it's a live performance from Bluegrass,
Yeah, the crowd actually
That's a
can
good
weigh in
point.
for the score. Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
absolutely.
All right, this is our next project. We got to do that.
There we go.
Sounds
All right, Alex, you got
Look at
I
this.
think you got a game. You got a game to watch.
I've been paying attention to it right now. I told Jeff like we're gonna do a short one because I got to watch the Timberwolves game. Timberwolves are up right now, 22-17. They're
Wow.
gonna win. Here we go.
All right, you just jinxed it. They're gonna lose
No,
now.
I ain't jinxing it. They haven't needed me. This has been another episode of Inside Scoop with Alex and Jeff. I am Alex Dingman.
I'm Jeff Doss. Thank you, Coach, for joining us. Thanks, everybody, all the insiders.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Yes, sir.